Welcome to another Dynasty Pros Devy Show. I'm Andy, and today I'm joined by SC. SC, how's it going?
Good, man. Good. A lot of interesting news, portal news and declares and all that good stuff. I would just want to say it's what a time to be alive, right? With all this portal NIL stuff going on, changing the game of college football as we speak. So excited to talk about some of these guys.
Yeah, we have a jam-packed episode today. Today we are talking Devy and C2C New Year's resolutions, what we learn and what we're going to take with us in 2024. All that and more after the intro. All right, let's start with it. We have news that just broke before the show started that Brock Bowers is not with the team for the Orange Bowl, so likely that means he's going to opt out. SC, he's everyone's tight end one.
Right.
In tight end premium leagues, if you have a top 6 pick, are you considering taking him at the 104, 105, 106? Or are you going to take the receivers?
Right now, I have it as if you have the 105, you're likely getting Brock Bowers. With where it stands right now, I have Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, and then Drake May going in that top spot. And then I think you take Neighbors. I mean, I know people will talk about Odunze, people will talk about maybe Jaden Daniels if he gets that good capital, but Bowers is looking like one of those unicorn tight ends. I know we said in Kyle Pitts too is a little bit, but Bowers has more playmaking ability. I feel like he's more of a matchup nightmare as far as his athleticism goes, lining up different around the field, and he's a good blocker. He's been part of this Georgia team that's been on the dominant run length for whatever you want to say, and he's been a part of that just because he's able to get on the field, able to move down the line if he needs to. So I say it's a 105, especially in a tight end premium. I think, yeah, you definitely have to take him there. Goes on team build. Like if I had Trey McBride, who's a younger looking alive, like a future top 5 tight end, rest of the way. Then I might think about it. Maybe I try to trade back if someone's needing that tight end, but I think he's a great assets to have. And right now I do have him as a top 5 pick.
As far as the tight end landscape goes, with last year's crop and with Brock Bowers, if you combine Brock Bowers with last year's crop, is Brock Bowers still the tight end one for you?
Before knowing what they did in the NFL season, sure. With knowing what they did in the NFL season, I mean, you want to argue Laporta, right? Just because how they're using Laporta. I wouldn't necessarily put Kincaid there, just because, oh, Kincaid's been up and down. Laporta's been a lot more consistent. So I would, you can say Laporta is above him just because we've seen it in the NFL right now, but he's definitely in that top 3 for sure. If he's not the top 2, I'm not mad if anyone has at the number 1 scene. But I think it'll go a lot, depending on where he gets drafted, right? I mean, we saw what's happening with Arthur Smith and Kyle Pitts right now, and this is horrible. So if we get another team that doesn't necessarily utilize that tight end, let's just say like a Tampa Bay, they have Cade Alden, who's a good tight end, but they don't really use him. They have good receivers, right? So that could drop him a little bit more. But again, a unicorn type of talent that I think you're not. He's going to be in the discussion if he goes to a team that just knows how to use him right.
Let's say he goes to Tennessee. With a landing spot like that, where you have Will Levis, who for now, instead of taking that short to intermediate pass, he's going to look to run. If Brock Bowers ends up at Tennessee, are you taking Laporta or are you taking Brock Bowers in a startup?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm probably taking Laporta in a startup just because I like Goff more than I like Levis right now. But I think that's just because Levis doesn't have those weapons. So it may bite you because he may be like, oh, snap, now I have a tight end that's reliable. And it could actually benefit him because honestly, if we're being real, he doesn't have any weapons outside of Hopkins. People say Burks is unhealthy. You don't know any of the other wide receivers on the name. You can say Chig at tight end. Derrick Henry's getting older. You had J. Spears. He doesn't really have much outside of Hopkins, so Bowers will be that other weapon. So it may bite you later. But if you're going safe, I think the Laporta is a safer bet.
I think it is safe to say that the tight end landscape really is changing, and it really does look good for once.
Yeah,
We've always said that, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, but really this year's crop, and even the one coming up for the 2024 class, there's a lot of potential, and the tight end landscape really is evolving. Now,
right.
let's move on to the next guy that we're going to talk about, and that's Devin Neal. He is returning for his senior season. Now, we're both big fans of him, SC. With
Right.
Devin Neal returning, what does he do for you as far as a Devy asset? And does he have a chance to be the RB1? Let's say Travion Henderson does not return. Do
Mhm.
you think Devin Neal has a chance to be the RB1 for next year's class?
So what does he do for me? He makes me go back to the drawing board and look at my board again. Because now I'm like, oh snap, this is a guy I was really high on. I was excited to get him in the later rounds, possibly late second, just because I think he's a sleeper running back that has potential to hit that NFL caliber running back that you want. Versatility, knows how to have get through the holes, knows how to get outside, has some good hands, all around just a good back. As far as does he have the potential to get to the RB1? I mean, based on what we saw this past year, sure. I mean, right now you can argue Singleton is, you can argue Katron, you can argue Ollie Gordon, you can argue Quinson Junkins. There's so many you can argue. Even Raheem Sanders going back, right? So you can argue so many players. And I think this past year, we saw it was uncertainty. It was flip flopping back and forth with RB1 of the class. And if he comes back and has a phenomenal season, I'm not disappointed at someone that does have him as that RB1. But it's gonna take a lot for him to do it. Just because this year was kind of the wake up year, I guess, where he kind of got on the map for a lot of people. And so he's gonna need to go back and show that again. Same thing for Ollie Gordon, right? If he wants to become that RB1, it's like you need to show what you showed this whole season again. I think we saw Quinson kind of take a step back. We saw Singleton kind of take a step back. So it kind of opened that up. Devin Neal has the potential. He's going back to a team that he knows. It's not like he's entering the transfer portal or anything. He's going back. So that's going to be a huge benefit for him, and it is an opportunity for him to go in there and have a successful season again, especially when you have some top dogs like Texas and Oklahoma leaving.
I go back and forth with this because I mentioned it on, I think it was 2 shows back, but Devin Neal would be my RB1 of this year's running back class.
Mhm.
I feel he has everything the NFL loves and that the NFL values and that the NFL wants.
Mhm.
I know we've talked about this before. My only concern was he wasn't getting any national run. He wasn't getting any notoriety. So with him coming back, that definitely does help. And with running backs, I don't think him being a senior hurts him. I think in
Mhm.
the past you can say, yeah, that hurts, but with the running back position being devalued so much, I don't think that really matters anymore. I think it's more of, you know, do you continue to enhance your stock? Did you come back for the right reason? I think he's coming back for the right reason. He wasn't getting that run. He wasn't getting noticed. So I do think with him coming back, it's going to certainly help. And I'm going to have him as my RB1 for next year. I'm going to have him above Rocket, above, whoever, Quinshawn. I'm going to have him above him. I'm going to have him. I'm not a big Nick Singleton fan, so I'm going to have him above, Devin Neal above him. I personally like Katron Allen more between the Penn State running backs, but that's a
Right.
discussion for another day.
Right.
We do have some more news coming in with some declares. We have Malachi Corley declared. To me, he's a top 3 slot receiver of this class. He is creative after the catch. He even said before the season that he kind of mimics his game after Deebo Samuel's. In this deep wide receiver class, with it being a lot of 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" guys that weigh over 210 pounds, with him being that slider build and being that slot guy, do you think he has a chance to being a round 2 pick?
Definitely. I think you always see a guy you think of like Tyquan Thornton a couple years ago, or a couple years ago for New England. You definitely have the potential to be it. And his playmaking ability is phenomenal. So um, it's which team would take that shot. I mean, this is a deep draft class, right? When you just talk about all around, the running back may be the weakest spot where it's at, where the quarterback, the tight end, the receiver, even defensive and offensive lineman, it's pretty deep. So, does he have that potential? Yeah. Um, and I can honestly see him going above an Xavier Worthy, going above AD Mitchell and things like that. These are guys we talked about in the first round, but I can see someone saying, look, we want Malachi Corley more because he's a playmaker that we can fit him all around the field if we need to, because we know he shines when the ball's in his hands. We can be versatile with him. We can do some things that teams aren't seeing from us in the past because we now have someone that has that playmaking ability. We just need to get him the ball. So can he be a second round pick? Definitely. I think it will surprise people though what team he goes to, because I think we'll see some teams in that second round that are like, hey, we need an extra wide receiver. Let's say Tennessee, but yet they're gonna go like a linebacker, defensive end, or whatever it may be, and then you're gonna see a team that doesn't need a wide receiver. Let's just say like a Minnesota Vikings, or something that has Jordan Ashton, Justin Jefferson, and they go and get Malachi Corley. So I think he's going to go to a surprise team, but I can definitely see him in round two.
I'm a big Corley guy. I think day two's a safe bet. Round two, I think, is probably a ceiling. I
Mhm.
think probably after pick 45 is when you'll probably start, putting him in consideration. I don't think he's got a chance to get a first round draft capital.
Mhm.
I think early round two is unlikely. I think it's after pick 45 is when you maybe think about it, but maybe round three is probably the safe bet.
Mhm.
We have a surprising declare, at least it is for me, and that is Kamani Vidal.
Mhm.
He is from Troy. He's a junior. He had another year, but he chose to leave partly due to his coach leaving,
Mhm.
the Troy coach leaving for Tulane, new system. Instead of staying for another year, he decides to go to the NFL draft. He's a great CFF asset.
Mhm.
He helped me win a league.
Yeah.
I I have issues finding a trait that he can lean on at the next level.
Right.
I don't think he'll ever be a bell cow back. I don't think his hands are good enough to be a third down back. So, are we looking at a fourth, fifth round guy that's a camp body and maybe get some run? Or do you think a little bit more highly of him?
I mean, fourth and fifth, I think you're going too high. So, Kamani Vidal, I mean, I don't know where to put him. Honestly, I think to me, something I'm thinking of is like Keaton Mitchell, right? Someone that he can maybe have a good game, but I mean, any player in the NFL can have a good game, right? It just has to be their week and they just go off. So, to mine, I don't think he's a starting NFL running back. He'll be a depth piece, but I think he can go in and have a good week 8 down the line, like a Keaton Mitchell has, just has a game that no one even knew he was. He's on the waiver wire and then he goes out and puts up 132 yards or something like that, a touchdown. And it's like, wow, we need to go get him. And then he kind of does another game, maybe 90 plus yards or so, because like, okay, and then he just drops. So I think he's a good talent. He's good all around, but um, I don't think this hurt him or helped him declaring. If he stay another year, I don't think it's gonna move him up unless he transferred out. That's just because it's Troy, right? So you're just not getting as much recognition as you should, and the competition isn't gonna be over the water for you. So with him, I just think he'll get an opportunity. Fourth or fifth would be great, but even then, you've mentioned it many times. Those fourth round picks, you treat them as like a second round, third, second half, third round pick, whatever. Um, I'm not necessarily treating it like that with him because I think if you're in a deep league, yeah, go draft him. Why not? Because he's gonna get that run. But at the same time, if I'm looking at that board, I'm probably seeing other guys I'm more familiar with, just based on what I've seen and tape wise. I'm more by that I mean familiar with as far as how they move, how they work, that I'm more excited about than I would be with Kamani. Wish the guy well. Hope he gets the capital he deserves, and hopes he goes out there and balls and proves me wrong. But right now, I just see him as a weekend filler that you just gotta play the right week, and if you do, hey, you're gonna get lucky.
And then with the next guy that we're going to talk about is Keon Coleman. I think Keon Coleman and Rome Odunze are probably the two most polarizing prospects at the wide receiver position in this class. For me, I'm not a Keon Coleman guy. I think he is just a jump ball catcher that can't create separation. He can't create after the catch. I think he would have been great probably in like the 2010s back then, and that's what the receivers were. They were 6'4" guys who won jump ball passes, but I think the game has evolved, and I don't think he is part of today's NFL. Where do you lie with Keon Coleman?
Really where you're staying at right now. I mean, right now he's my wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wide receiver 6. This class, assuming everyone is coming out, that it's Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Odunze, Franklin, Egbuka. But I've always said, outside of Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, that bunch right there, Franklin,
Yeah.
Odunze, Egbuka, I don't know if you can go wrong with them. I think those are all going to be great guys at their time. Now they all may be guys that I don't necessarily see them balling out that year one, like just having a phenomenal season. But I think you're not going wrong with those guys. But Coleman, to me, everything you hit on, that lack of separation, I don't necessarily see the speed I want. He's a great guy that can win the contested catch, but it's going to matter on the quarterback that goes to him. I don't see him making the play unless the quarterback's throwing him dimes, if that makes sense. Like, I don't see him going out of his route to necessarily make the extra mile for the play. I think the quarterback that he goes to needs to have some precision. If he goes to like a Patrick Mahomes, great. He's going to win that wide receiver 1 role. But if he goes somewhere where there's already an alpha, let's just say like let's go back to Tennessee. Let's say Hopkins. I don't think he's gonna go in there right away and just jump Burks. Burks is unhealthy, so that's gonna be his downfall. But I think he's got to work and show some room. But even then, next year I would still say Hopkins is the wide receiver 1. I don't think he's gonna go in there and necessarily jump over that. A great prospect to look at. Someone that I think will possibly get some first round capital. Obviously, we can go top 20 in a lot of mocks. But even then, every first round has a bust, and by that I don't mean they just don't pan out at all in the NFL, but don't pan out the way you want them with that capital, right? Like, again, we see Treylon Burks, he's just not being healthy, and that hurts. And I just see a similarity where Coleman's going to go high, and I don't necessarily know if he's going to give you what you want, especially with him potentially being, if you're talking rookie drafts, I've had some mocks where he's going 107, 108, and I don't know if that's the right place. I'm kind of now pushing him back to that late first, even that early second round, where you can get the most value out of that.
All right. We have kind of breaking news. It's not on the show sheet, so I'm going to surprise you right here. Kansas State transfer Will Howard. He is still evaluating his options. He is now going to be looking at Ohio State, USC, and the NFL. Let's throw out the NFL because he's not an NFL guy right now. Does this look bad for USC? They've been toying around with every portal quarterback known, and they failed to get Dylan Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
Cam Ward hasn't really thought about them.
Mm-hmm.
They've been sniffing around Will Howard for what seems like a couple of weeks now. Lincoln Riley flew out to meet him, and he still didn't commit to USC. Lincoln Riley goes all in with these portal guys, loses Malachi Nelson. The only quarterback he has right now is Miller Moss. Is this more of an indictment on USC and where their program is at with Lincoln Riley, that none of these quarterbacks want to go to a high-profile program? Because I've always said Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat, and that's why he's looking for these portal guys. Now that he literally only has Miller Moss, and he missed out on DJ Lagway for the
Yeah.
true freshman from Florida. He was trying to get him last second, missed out on him. It was reported over the weekend that he's trying to get Aiden Childs, but Aiden Childs doubled down with Michigan State. Where do you view this USC program and Lincoln Riley and their entire quarterback situation?
Sorry, I'm looking on 247. Just I couldn't remember any other freshman coming in to declare, and I'm right. No other freshman has necessarily
Yeah, they don't
declared.
have anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. So uh man, it's hard. The thing was he's considering Ohio State, USC, or the NFL, right? Was that the news? Okay. So like you mentioned NFL, I mean, if he declares to that, congrats, man. Good job. I hope you get drafted. And dude, I'm not drafting you. I'm sorry. Um, I kind of feel like Ohio State came in and maybe they were set on the quarterback, and they came in and said, "Look, man, like it's not. We don't know if it's happening, and we are considering other options, and you're one of our guys that we're looking at." So in that sense, to me, I'll be answering your question in a second, but to me, it's like, okay, if Ohio State's coming at me, I know they have wide receivers, a plethora of them. USC is about to lose a bunch of their wide receivers. I'm going to consider Ohio State now because I think they'll give me a better option to look good. Because we're if you want to talk about Caleb Williams, right? He's still going to be the 101. At least we're always in for a surprise, so you never know. But most likely the 101, most likely 101 in Superflex rookie drafts. But his defense didn't hold up. And the only reason why we're still considering Caleb Williams is because honestly, I feel like it's because a lot of people had him as the 101 again, right? We've had in the past like 3 or 4 years, we've had 5 generational talents. Well, how many generational talents can you have in a generation, right? Caleb Williams is another one, though, but he's a generation talent. He's going to be the best thing, right? So I think he sees. Does it hurt USC? Yes, but I think yeah, you need a quarterback, but at the same time, it's like Lincoln. Your issue wasn't the quarterback last year. Your quarterback did well. Your issue was the defense, and yeah, don't get me wrong, you're losing one of the top prospects that we've seen since last year. I'm gonna say because there's top prospects last year, right? But a top prospect in this year's draft, you're losing him. Sure, you lost your freshman. He entered the transfer portal and Malachi Nelson, and you have Miller Moss. Okay, but guess what? Miller Moss may be able to get it done. Your defense can't, though. We saw your defense can't do it. Your defense was looking miserable. Like it just seemed like they had no gas to them. They were just getting eaten up left and right. So if I'm looking at them and I'm talking to them, my question are you getting receivers? Because I know you can get playmakers there. At least that's been what it has been at USC. But now I'm asking, can you get people on defense? Because right now your defense is bad and you need to beat them. Because if I go there and we lose the game, but it's not on me, it's the defense, guess what? It's still on me. The media is going to make it out to be on me, even though it wasn't. So Lincoln Ryan has to be on the high seat. USC is a awardable university, right? They've been to Rose Bowls, they've been to Orange Bowl, they've been to all these different bowl games, and they've done great. And they're so notorious for just having winning seasons left and right, and being good, being Southern California, being in a great area. But I don't think he's not. He's right now. Will Howard is a good quarterback for him, but he's not losing anything if he doesn't miss on him. I mean, go after. I'd rather have Cam Ward. I'd rather have other quarterbacks. Malachi Nelson, even but he's gone already. But it's like he's not end all be all if you can't get him. But I think it just hurts when a guy that was supposedly supposed to be committed to you, and now he's like, wait. I'm actually thinking about these two. It should raise questions for other quarterbacks, but all these quarterbacks need to be asking the coach if they're meeting with Riley, what are you doing on defense? Because the offense wasn't the issue last year.
I think it'd be interesting if at the end of the day, Lincoln Riley goes to Malachi Nelson and say, hey, just come back. Just come back, compete for the job. It's just you and Miller Moss. Because if Will Howard hasn't agreed to come to you now, what are you going to have to do? Are you going to have to pony up another $250,000 for him to come to you? Will Howard isn't the answer if that's the case anyways. Will Howard will get you to 8-5, and that's what you were with Caleb. So Will Howard isn't going to help you. Will Howard's only going to hurt you. So if there's any chance to fix that relationship with Malachi Nelson, he should do that and just go to camp with Malachi Nelson and Miller Moss, and the best guy win out, and hopefully you can be, I don't know,
75 again.
9-4, 7-5, yeah, something like that. But
Do you,
one saying that I've always had with Lincoln Riley is he turns a Ferrari into a Mustang.
mm,
Everywhere he goes, he gets a great opportunity. At Oklahoma, Bob Stoops had a great team there. He did great the first year, and then second, third year it got worse and worse.
mhm,
Same thing with USC. He inherited a really good team.
mhm,
This year, there were playoff aspirations,
mhm.
and they went what, 8-5. So he's
Yeah.
well on his way to turning that Ferrari into a Mustang.
No.
But let's get back on track with the show
What
today.
was real thing
Go
with
ahead.
Chris Howard? Do you think this decision now has to be with some, and we don't know any of this, right? We're not like digging deeper and we don't have it, but do you think part of it could be NIL money? Like Ohio State came and said, hey, we can offer you this amount, and he went back to USC and said, well, I have this amount on table, and now at this point USC is like, well, we'll think about it, and I think that that's important to think about now, because that's really what's going to change the game of college football, right? If you have certain players getting X amount of money from one university, but this other university is probably a better fit, but they're like, man, I'm gonna go get paid in college. Like, I'm gonna go get, 3 million instead of 1.5 million, even if it's a worse school. Do you think that might be a weighing issue there?
Here's what I think. Devin Brown couldn't beat out Kyle McCord, and Kyle McCord couldn't manage a game for his life with Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams, all those guys. He couldn't manage that. So he's now gone to Syracuse. Ryan Day has had 2.5 weeks with Devin Brown in practice.
Mm,
Ryan Day is probably looking at that and is probably saying he's not the answer. Their true freshman, Luke Keinholz, he's not the answer.
mm,
Aaron Nolan, they have coming in. I've scouted him. He's a 4-star kid. A lot of the services have him as the QB3. I
mm,
think he's more of a stopgap quarterback. They
mm,
have a quarterback in the 2025 class that's really good. So I think Ohio State needs a true stopgap quarterback. And Cam Ward is not a fit for Ohio State. Ohio State wants a quarterback that is in rhythm, in system, 3-step drop, get the ball out of the hands, and just distribute to the wide receivers.
yeah,
Cam Ward doesn't do that. Cam Ward hangs on to the ball for 5, 6, 7 seconds because he can't process defenses.
yeah,
I could go on a huge rant about Cam Ward because there are people in this space that believe he's a top 5 quarterback in their rankings. And I'm going on a tangent here because if you have Cam Ward in your rankings as a top 5 quarterback in Devy, C2C, whatever kind of formatting you use, you're not watching the actual game tape. You're box score scouting. Because if you watch Cam Ward, he hangs on to the ball for 5, 6, 7 seconds. He's looking through the defenses because he doesn't trust what he sees. So he hangs on to the ball. He then gets sacked and then he fumbles. That's why he has a lot of fumbles, a lot of interceptions, and a lot of bad interception worthy plays. It's because he hangs onto the ball too long. Ohio State wants a 3-step, 5-step drop quarterback and get the ball out. Will Howard can do that. Devin Brown, he's kind of a maverick kind of a quarterback. He likes to kind of play to his own tempo, to his own beat, kind of like a Baker Mayfield type. And that doesn't fit Ryan Day's system. So I think Ryan Day is looking at who's the options left at quarterback. He sees Will Howard there. Will Howard hasn't committed to USC. And yeah, you're probably right. Ohio State probably offered him a little bit more NIL money, and then Will Howard's going to USC and Lincoln Riley and say, "Hey, I got this from Ohio State. Can you match it? If you can't, I'll go to you. If you can't, I'm just gonna weigh my options." So I do think the NIL does have something to do with it. And then let's go to the next topic, and we'll get back on track here. And that is Malik Murphy. He is transferring to Duke. I think this is an interesting spot. I'll put it that way. Duke doesn't really have the playmakers at wide receivers. There's a there's a receiver that I kind of like out there, but I don't think he's anybody that's going to turn heads at the next level. Their running back Waters, he transferred out. I believe he's going to NC State. He was the guy that I liked at Duke. I thought he was misused and miscast there. He goes to NC State now, but it's pretty much going to be Malik Murphy's show at Duke.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he is a true Devy asset and a possible, I don't know, top 2 NFL round pick, top 3 NFL round pick next year? You know, if he balls out, at Duke.
No. To be straight with that answer, no. I think he's still a day 3 pick. But if he balls out of Duke, which I can't see happening because it is on him, you look about Riley Leonard when he was there. It was just all him, right? It's no one else on the field. It's just him. He's the one running the ball. He's the one passing. He's the one just making it all happen. He just has no weapons. So maybe in Malik Murphy's eyes, this was a good opportunity for him to show some possible dual threat abilities, or just say it's all on me, so my stats are going to go through the roof. So maybe NFL scouts will look at me differently, because I think he would have got beaten out of Texas. I think he's not necessarily one of your. I know Duke is ACC, but not necessarily your top Power 4 quarterback that you'd be looking for. So this, I don't necessarily. He can sneak into a day 2 as a late 3rd, maybe, and that's because he does just have a crazy season this year. It's just he has to do it all. Will it happen? No. What I have seen from him, it's like, all right, you're a quarterback. You'll be in the draft, but guess what? You're gonna be a backup player. I don't see him as a star franchise quarterback or anything like that. And I think this move was because he did see a quarterback like Riley Leonard getting some kind of draft, stock and everything, just getting some kind of recognition. But when you look at it, it's like, wow, Duke just really has nobody else. And all they had was a quarterback that knew how to run the ball. And I think this is an opportunity for him to step in that same field, possibly.
Yeah, I'm not a real big fan of him as far as a Devy asset goes. Now, for these next ones, I'm just going to do a quick hitter so we can move on to a next topic that you can take care of. But Braden Schrager from Hawaii withdraws from the portal. He's going to go back to Hawaii. I think this is a really good thing for everyone involved. I think this elevates Pofele Ashlock. He's a guy that I really love for CFF. I think this is going to help him. I think Pofele has a chance to be a top 10 CFF wide receiver next year. Stephen McBride returns for his senior year at Hawaii. He's his running mate on the other side. He is a former Kansas kid, got real good speed, really good there. I think with Braden returning, I think Hawaii and head coach Timmy Chang can turn around. They could possibly get 6 wins in a bowl game next year. Jaden DeLora from Arizona enters the portal. This will be his 2nd time in the portal, I believe. I don't think he's a power 4 quarterback. I think he should look to the group of 5. I think he would have great success there. Yeah. I don't think he has any NFL Devy Valley, so I think he should just go out to like a MAC or a Mountain West. Just air it out, put numbers, and just have some fun. EJ Warner, he is Kurt Warner's kid, formerly at Temple. He puts up numbers, crazy numbers. He transfers to Rice, goes to another similar air raid style of offense. So that'll be kind of intriguing for your, C2C leagues. Braylon Braxton, he was previously at Tulsa. He was supposed to have the starting job. He looked really good in spring and fall camp, but he had a high ankle injury week 1 and never really recovered from that. Lost the starting job to, I believe, Carnell Williams, who was also a freshman. He transfers to Marshall, so he'll pair with Rasheen Ali, and it'll be interesting to have those two, run the ball and see if Marshall transforms to more of a RPO type offense. I think that'd be fun with him at quarterback and Rasheen Ali at the running back position. Tate Rodemaker for Florida State, who took over once Jordan Travis got hurt. He enters the portal as well. Florida State, I believe, has 20 guys either in the portal or opting out in the Orange Bowl against Georgia.
It's a
Okay,
mess.
SC. Yeah.
Yeah, what
Trevor
fun.
Etienne transfers to Georgia. That was confirmed. I would say it's safe to assume that Etienne's going to be the 1A and Roderick
Mm,
Robinson will be the 1B.
agreed.
That leaves the third down back to Branson Robinson, who's recovering from injury. So I think they're going to bring him along slowly. So I don't think it'll be him. They also have Andrew Paul, who will be 2 years removed from his ACL. And then they have a trio of true freshmen that they brought in. Nate Frazier, in the consensus, he's anywhere from RB2 to RB5. He's a really exciting guy. If you haven't had a chance to watch him, he is electric, a converted wide receiver, plays at powerhouse Mater Day. The only issue with him is he's never had more than 96 carries in a single season, so that is a little bit of a concern. They have Dwight Phillips. He's more of a scat back type, really speedy guy. And then they brought in Chauncey Bowens, who's more of a bruiser. Now, for this entire backfield at
Mm,
cost, who are you taking in a C2C startup? So you have all of these backs available in a startup. Who
mm.
are you looking at the most and why? And who's the second guy you're looking forward to and why? And we're taking in costs, so
Yeah.
we're taking in Branson Robinson's injury, so he's
Mm.
going to be cheap. We're taking into effect Andrew Paul and his injury, and he's probably free. And we're taking into effect the trio of freshmen, who's probably going to be top 10 picks in startups, probably.
Yeah.
Who would you take out of this whole group of backs?
I do want to say Branson Robinson. Not necessarily gonna say him, but I mean, my answer would be I'm just a fan of him. So I mean, the fact that he got injured this year, I really thought this was the year. But with ETN coming back and Roger Robinson looking pretty good last year, I think that's gonna hurt Branson. He's got to do a lot in camp just to show that he's fully healthy and good to go. I think he could be one of the top backs once he gets his time at Georgia. Now, Roger Robinson though is a good pick, especially with ETN there. Everyone may think, oh, ETN is the one guy they're going to run into the ground. They're just going to utilize him and use it. Sure, but Roderick is a big guy too. He knows how to get between the tackles. He knows how to get that stiff arm out to get the extra yards. But at cost right now, I mean, just because I like the talent, I've seen a lot of him is Andrew Paul. Especially if you look at third down back, this guy has some elusiveness to him. He's pretty quick. He can catch the ball. He's someone that if they do utilize it as a true third down back and just bring him in for those pass catching opportunities, I think that can kind of showcase some of his skills. So I think for him, he may be someone you want to watch because if I agree with you that ETN and Roger Robinson are the 1-2. If one of those goes down, just because, as you mentioned, they might bring in Branson a little bit slowly, Andrew's going to get that shot, and I think that's an opportunity for him. Out of the three freshmen, I haven't seen much on Nate Frazier and Dwight Phillips, but as I did say earlier before, so I've seen Bowens. Bowens is a nice guy. I think he fits that mold of what Georgia looks for in your running backs. Now, as you see with a lot of their freshmen, though, they're going to have to wait their turn. With what you said about these guys, it'll be exciting to see. But for me, again, without seeing Phillips or Frazier watching their tape quite yet, I do think Bowens fits that mold of a Georgia running back to be that bold out, to be that bruiser, to be between the tackles, to just pound the rock down the line. And I would be excited to see him as well. Andrew Paul will be my first pick. And if you can't get costs, I mean, I think Roderick is in for a good season. So, I mean, I would go him as well. His costs should drop heavily because ETN's there. And honestly, though, I mean, I don't think it hurts to go after ETN. Some people may be like, man, Georgia has a crowded back room at that running back position. So let me go ahead and try to see what I can get for ETN. Maybe someone doesn't like guys that have that big of depth of the running backs. And we talk about all the time, ETN was going hand in hand with Montrell Johnson. And I think both Robinsons, Roderick and Branson and Paul could all be better than Montrell, just if they get that raw full time. So ETN does have a challenge in front of him, so it doesn't hurt to go. But I think someone to look on is definitely Andrew Paul.
I think an argument could be made that ETN, Roderick Robinson, and Nate Frazier can all go within the first 12 rounds of a startup. Branson Robinson, you're probably going to get maybe in the late teens, early 20s with that injury. Andrew Paul is probably free. Dwight Phillips. In every league, there's always one or two managers that take Devy guys all the way to like round 40.
Right.
So Phillips might get taken probably like around 12 to around 25, between that range. And then Bowens will probably be somewhere in the mix too. So like all of these guys are going to get decent capital in a startup. So for me, I'm not an RB guy, so I would be out at all of them at cost. But if I had to choose one back, I would choose Nate Frazier. I think he's really electric, and I think he's someone that's going to be special. Now we're going to move on. So I'm going to do some quick hitters, and then we're going to get into the main topic of the show, which is our New Year's resolution. We're 40 minutes in. Jaquavius Marks is going to transfer to USC. USC always gets a portal back, so he's going to be there, going to get a lot of playing time. Michael Allen from NC State entered the portal. He's going to UNLV. Kind of weird because he was getting run at NC State. Now he goes to a G5. Sia Bangura. Only reason why I mentioned him is because I'll mention him later on in our New Year's resolution. He went from Ohio to Minnesota. Don't like that gig at all. Jeremiah Hunter for Cal, who is probably their second best player behind Jaden Ott, enters the portal. I'm kind of excited to see where he goes. Kobe Young, I know you're a bigger fan of Kobe Young than I am. He's a 6'5", 218 guy who was miscast at Miami. He goes to Georgia. So Georgia is retooling the wide receiver position for Carson Beck. And Tobias Merriweather goes to Cal. I think that's a good spot for him, I guess. He hasn't really done anything. Now, let's go to the body of the show, and that is our New Year's resolution. What we learned from this past season, what mistakes we made, what we're going to take with us to 2024, all that good stuff. I'll start first so that you can have some time to take a look at your notes and see where you want to go. I will start with the C2C side. Typically, if I'm in a startup, I will move to the CFF side a little earlier than most. Typically, for me, the first 4 rounds, I'm going Devy heavy. And then rounds 5, I'm evaluating who's left, which freshmen are left. If the freshman group is at like a tier 4 for my rankings, I'm gonna pivot off, and I'm gonna start looking at CFF guys. Now, for example, this past season for a startup, round 5 guys, you're looking at Torrey Horton, Malachi Corley, Rasheen Ali, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels win that range, and a couple of my startups. So you start to kind of pivot, or you either stay Devy heavy. So for those of you who haven't played many C2C startups, the old rule, I guess you want to say in air quotes, is the first 10 rounds you go Devy guys, and then you go to CFF guys in round 11 to like round 20. And then around 20 and below, that's when you go for, best available, whatever you want to fill out your roster. And that's just the standard, traditional way to do a C2C startup. Now, a lot of times like we just talked about, you'll have guys that will go Devy heavy until like round 40, and then they'll get some CFF guys. Or you have guys that will take Devy guys for round 1 and round 2, and then they go CFF for round 3, 4, all the way to round 10 to try to win the CFF side, and then they go for best available between Devy. So there's a lot of different strategies involved, but me typically around round 5 is when I go to CFF. I think what's important to take a look and take note is if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you have validation of a workhorse or target status of that player you're targeting, and you're not looking at projection. And
Right.
there's two guys I did that this year. One is Sia Bangura. In one startup, I took Sia Bangura in like round 6 or round 7 because Rasheen Ali was already taken. Sia Bangura was coming off a 1,000-yard season as a freshman. He projected to take the next step and to be that CFF asset. What unfolded was Ohio had a horrible offense that I don't think anyone saw coming. But for that one, we only had his true freshman season, so we didn't really have that confirmation of that workhorse status. We also Allison came back. O'Shea Allison came back, I believe. So that was another thing that I am telling people to take a look at. If there's returning players into that running back room or that receiving room, take a look at that and take that into consideration. Another guy is Alex Adams. I took him, I believe, like round 11 to round 13. I don't have the actual round, but it was somewhere in the early teens. He is an Akron kid. With him, he had target competition from a senior that was returning. But he ended the season, I believe it was his last 5 games. He had 10 targets or more in his last 5 games. And I believe he had a range of 18 to like 40 fantasy points per game. So he blew up the last 5 games, and I projected him to take that next step. But if we look back, he had a senior coming back that was going to be eating into his targets, and that is something to take into consideration. So for anyone that's going to move off of Devy into a CFF asset, you want to make sure that they have that workhorse volume that's going to be there. Rasheen Ali had it. Torrey Horton had it. Malachi Corley had it. But the two that I mentioned did not. So SC, you can, if you want to talk about that, you can, or you can talk about your first takeaway for the season.
No, I mean, I think that's something great to look at, and I think that goes into saying, in calling me, you do it for the NFL too when you look at your rookie drafts, but don't be blind to the fact that even though you have a talent in front of you, that there's no one else on the field. And I'll point at someone like Adam Randall, right? That was someone I fell in love with this offseason going into Clemson, and Clemson was just a bombshell for everybody, just a complete blow up in our face, for Kate Kublik. And don't necessarily invest into them, take into consideration, okay, what ifs, are our possibilities. But even, sell early. I think that's something you have to look at. If you have an opportunity for an offense that maybe the first 2 games they're like, okay, this wasn't good, but then you see a great game, don't be afraid to sell that, or just be like, hey, this is something that you can go out there and get. If I could have traded like a Adam Randall and went out to go get an AD Mitchell before he had a blow up game, just because of his value on Devy, and people are like, oh, it's Wardy Sanders, all that kind of stuff, go ahead and do that. So be aware of your schemes that they're around, be aware of what players, like you mentioned, are coming back, or even now, I think the transfer portal is huge. If anyone's playing C2C leagues and they're not staying up to date on the transfer portal, you're missing heavy news, because all of this is big time, and it could affect not only what these players do in the future, but also their mentality, right? Like, for example, Malachi Nelson stayed, but yet he's not. He's in the transfer portal. But if he did, and yet they're saying we're bringing in another quarterback, what's this doing to this kid who thought he was the next one up? Is this going to affect his game in the future? And just be aware about those kind of situations going in. My biggest takeaway for me is not to, and this could be with the 0 RB fans, but not to fall in love with your running backs. I mean, my RB1 going into the year was Raheem Sanders, right? That was it all the way. And then I finally had to move him after like week 8 or 9, and I started moving around Braylon Allen, and I started putting Trey Benson and Travion Henderson. Don't fall in love with those running backs. And this next year, I'm really up in the air on who I'm putting at 1. I want to put Rocket. I want to put Quinshawn. I want to put Ollie. I want to put all these different guys, but it's each year is a different year. And like the NFL season, once you put those treads on those tires, it becomes harder, right? You get through injury, you're getting beat up, you're getting bruised. Don't fall in love with your running backs. Be able to interchange them. Wide receivers are deep, so you don't have to worry much there. But I think the running backs, it's like right now we're saying 2025 class is going to be a great running back room. Some of these guys are going to stay in their year, whether it be a Quinshawn, whether it be an Ollie, whether it be a Katron or even Singleton. Some of them are going to stay in their year, and it's just going to be if you're banking on that 2025 class in your rookie drafts, be aware about that because it's not always going to end up as we see it. So just understand NIL transfer portals changing the game as we speak, and now we have to look more into this and what these players are doing for an opportunity. Are they going for money? Are they going because it's a better opportunity for them as a school program? And I think that for C2C that's big because if you have quarterbacks that are taking a step back, for example, Raheem going to South Carolina, I don't necessarily think that's a great. I won't say not a great fit, but it doesn't move the needle for me necessarily. Be like, okay, yeah, he's definitely RB1 again. It's like that's kind of a wash thing, but did they give you a good opportunity? Sure, maybe, but that could have just been money talks rather than here's an opportunity, a better opportunity for you.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm a zero RB guy, so I'm typically how I we're kind of going to go in deep here, but how I usually construct my rosters is I'll have maybe 5 or 6 running backs. I'll probably load up on receivers, probably get like 20 to 25 receivers, and then I'll fill the rest out with quarterback and tight end, and then I will trade for need if I see it. So I will typically I will typically aim for CFF running backs. Um, Typically. And then if I have such volume at the wide receiver position and so much value there that then I'll try to flip that for a running back Devy asset that I know is going to leave for the draft. Now it's going to be harder these next couple of years just because of how the running back landscape is, but that's typically how I do my builds. So I do agree with the zero RB way, and we're just go ahead and just pluck away at receivers. Just keep going at them because receivers hold their value non-freshmen. So receivers that have already produced. So like actual Devy assets like a Evan Stewart, Ted McMillan, those guys, like those guys hold their value. Once you've seen it on field, they hold their value. Running backs don't hold their value. Quarterbacks don't hold their value, but the receivers do. So I do agree with that. My second take is going to be for a Devy side. Landing spots matter and positional rooms matter. And I'm going to go and detail a couple of examples here. This past season for LSU, we know they had a full receiving room. They had Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Kyron Lacey, Aaron Anderson. I like him. I don't know why, but I like him, but he's not that good. And then they had a trio of freshman guys that were high 4-star guys. Shelton Sampson Jr., Kyle Parker, and Jalen Brown. Those were high 4-star kids who had a lot of ability, real good talent. If you watched their tape, you probably would have fell in love with them. But they were stuck. They were stuck behind guys, similar with Jurion Dickey. He was stuck behind guys. So when you're doing a startup or a supplemental draft and you're looking at these true freshmen coming in, you have to take a look at their positional room. Is it a full room? Is it an empty room? Are they going to have a chance to have playing time? It doesn't matter how good someone is if there's bodies in front of them. Like Jurion Dickey, before the season started, he was getting comped to A.J. Brown, to Des Bryant, to all these guys. But there were so many guys in front of him, he couldn't find his way onto the field. Yes, there was note that he had that torn labrum and everything, but it's tough for these guys that are coming in who are talented, but they have a full room in front of them. And what I want to outline is this year's Alabama group. Alabama brings in right now, they have 4 receivers. I'm going to pull up my rankings to give you the names here. So they have 4 guys. 2 of them are 5-star kids, and that's a Cam Coleman. I compliment the T. Higgins. When you watch his tape, it's full of jump catches, so it's a little weird. Perry Thompson, he's a little bit more raw, but he's a little speedier guy. He's the second 5-star kid that they brought in. They also brought in Bryce Kane. He's a four-star kid who I really like. I think he's going to work well out of the slot, but you know that's the third guy they bring in, and then the fourth guy that they bring in. Let me pull it up here. Where is he? They bring in another kid, but they have four freshmen coming in that are going to be in that room. It is Malcolm Simmons. So that's something that I wanted to take note, because you're going to have managers take Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson probably in a supplemental, probably the end of the first into all the way through the second, possibly early third. And I just want people to know that position and depth matters, and at Auburn, yeah, they're all freshmen, but there's going to be four bodies there for potentially three spots. And they're talking about getting Ryan Williams, who's another five-star kid that, is for a different show. But so they have four guys that have already signed, and I just want people to take a note. Probably 50% of that room is going to bust first year, and you don't want to be choosing the two that flop. And so that's my second takeaway.
Mine would be, don't fall in love with the freshman. There is, let's look at Texas, for example, CJ Baxter, right? He probably went high in your leagues, at least a top 10 round, right? If anything, I think just because of his value as an asset in your Devy leagues. But yeah, you could have got Jonathan Brooks. He was someone that probably went 15 or 20. So don't be heavy on those freshmen, especially nowadays with these transfer portals. I mean, we look at Dylan Raiola right now, right? If you were doing some startups as soon as the season ended and you're going into it, you're now looking at it like, okay, wait, he's now in Nebraska and I thought he was going to Georgia. Things are going up and back before. Don't go head over heels on these freshmen just simply because so much can change. And going on to what you're saying on their value can depreciate or go up, just depending on where they're at in their situation. Freshmen are so hard to predict, and we see it time and time again where a five-star athlete goes somewhere, but then it doesn't pan out. And go with the guys go with the assets whether it's a guy that's entering the transfer portal, right, or it's a guy that's staying another year. I would say if they're staying another year in their same system, that's a heavy go-to, but if it's a guy you liked, you mentioned earlier, Cam Ward has a great arm. If you like him, go after him because you see what he's done at a college level. Granted, he's going to a different conference, but you've seen what he's done at a college level. So I would take him over a Julian Sayin or a DJ Lagway, even though I like them as prospects. You don't know what you're going to get out of the freshman. It's like a college player going to the NFL. Sometimes there's a buzz because it's a different game. It's a faster speed, right? These high school athletes look great. Taking consideration the school they're going to. Are they playing in these top 6A, 7A type schools, or are they at like a small 2A, 3A school, so they're just dominating over everybody? You don't fall in love with these freshmen because time can change throughout. Now, instead of taking them early in your drafts, I'd rather say try to buy them low when you can, right? Like a Dante Moore. When he got pulled, go ahead and buy him. But if you were doing a startup and you took him because you're like, oh, he's going to UCLA, he's going to be a stud there, and you took him in those top 10 rounds, you're now hurting because his value is lower than what you took him right now. Because even that Oregon, I like that as a better fit, but he's more than likely behind Dylan Gabriel. So you're now paying cost rather than someone else giving you cost for him. So don't fall in love with these freshmen. Take them with a grain of salt. Don't get me wrong. Some of these come out there and they're studs right out the gate. We've seen freshmen do it time and time again. But at the same time, when you're doing these startup drafts, think about, okay, who's in like you mentioned in the room, who is this running back or quarterback going to be competing against? If that, can I see them be successful? Right now, I'd be scared if any freshman quarterback ends up going to USC because there's a vacant spot. But at the same time, I'm like, man, that kind of it kind of did hurt Caleb a little bit in my eyes, right? Just because they didn't win. Is that something where he needs that defense to hold him up? So be aware about that. There's a lot of studying that needs to go into freshmen all in general, but because they are going to a new level, be prepared for them to bust. So take them later rather than earlier just so you can get cost back.
Yeah, I do think that for managers that are doing a sub draft, I think it's important to have tiers. I don't think that's. I kind of wanted to rant earlier on, but we were kind of running late. Now we're an hour into it. Who cares if we go long? So my first rant that I was going to talk about was tiers, and when we were talking about Keon Coleman, and you were talking about you have that Harrison tier, and then the neighbors tier, and then that next tier. Not enough managers use tiers, and I think everyone should draft in tiers because I think far too often people get caught up. Who's your wide receiver 6? Who's your wide receiver 7? Who's your wide receiver 8? It should be what tier do you have this receiver in, and who is around that? Because when you were talking about that, I wanted to go to Roma Dunze because Roma Dunze is probably the most polarizing guy out there. And I think you had made a post. I want to say it was during the Pac-12 championship game, and you were talking about him, and I said I had him as my wide receiver 7. He's my wide receiver 7, but he's in my tier 3. Tier 3 has like 8 guys in there. It's a big tier for me, and I could have any one of those guys in that tier. He just happens to be the 7th guy overall, and I think there's 2 guys below him in that tier. So it all depends on your tier and why you have that tier. So to pivot off from Odunze and to talk about these freshmen, I think it's important to have these tiers because if you're doing a startup or a supplemental and we're getting to let's say for a sub draft, round 8 out of 15, you're probably looking at a tier 5 or a tier 6 or even a tier 7, depending on what the position is. Are you going to get a tier 6 player that might get over recruited the following year who can't get on the playing field? Or are you going to take a CFF asset that's going to get you points, win you weeks, and possibly win you a championship? Because at the end of the day, in a C2C league, you want to win championships. Yeah, you want to have Devy assets, so you have that Devy pipeline to the NFL, but there's that balance that some managers either ignore or don't care about, and they'll go the entire 15 rounds. They'll take all freshmen. They'll take a 3-star freshman from Alabama that probably will never see the light of day, who will have to transfer out and down to a G5, and you would have spent or waited 2 or 3 years to get that kid onto a playing field when you could have got a CFF asset, got your points, won you some weeks. And I think that's the thing about C2C that I really love, is that there's so many strategies involved, so many ways to play. There's a guy that I know, he will draft in a startup. He'll probably take the first 30 to 35 rounds, all Devy guys. And then if it's a 45 round draft, the last 10 to 15 rounds, he'll then go for CFF guys. And he found some success because some guys that he believes to be Devy assets were CFF assets, like a Ollie Gordon. So he was able to hit and make it to the playoffs. But if you're solely drafting freshmen in a startup and you're going freshman when you're like in around 25 or around 30, I think you're making a mistake because those guys are going to get over recruited. Now, if you go for a 3-star kid at a group of 5 school, that could work. But if you're going for nonstop true freshmen, yeah, you're going to fail. That's not going to work. Right. And my next topic that I want to talk about is for C2Cs and for startups. Typically, when I'm playing in a C2C startup, I wait on CFF quarterbacks. Now, I may take a Devy quarterback in the first 10 rounds. Usually it's just one, but I usually wait to draft a quarterback until like around 20 and beyond. This past off season, I think I took 2 quarterbacks before by by the time round 20 ended, I only had 2 quarterbacks. I took
Mhm.
Malachi Nelson, which doesn't look good, and I took Garrett Nussmeier, I believe, like around 18. I didn't take any CFF quarterbacks. I just kept going away at the wide receiver position,
Mhm.
and then I started looking at quarterbacks. I lucked out because I got Caden Salter and I got Byron Brown.
Nice.
And on the waiver wire, I got Jalen Raynor for Arkansas State, who was a really good asset. So I lucked out and got those kind of players to win me weeks, and eventually I won a championship with them. But I got lucky. I
Mhm.
think going forward, what I want to take a look at is for me to take a CFF quarterback in like round 10 and 11 and round 12 and secure that position, because in most C2Cs you're starting 2 quarterbacks. So if I didn't luck out with Salter and Brown, I would have been starting Chevin Cordero for San Jose State. uh, it would have been Jaden Delora, uh, uh, Frank Harris. I got him in a trade, and I think someone else. So I would have been struggling at quarterback, and I don't think I would have made the playoffs. So that's something that I want to take a look at for myself and try to implement it in a couple of startups.
No, I mean, going off that, I mean, you think about it, it's not a bad move because let's say you get these CFF assets, right? But then your team just isn't following through, right? And you went heavy on wide receiver or running back. Now these CFF assets have more value to get these Devy assets, right? Whereas if a Devy asset fails, it's harder to go get a CFF asset to help you elevate your team, right? So if you went after, let's just say, Malachi Nelson, who's now transferring out. Well, now his stock kind of went down because we don't know where he's going. He could go and it could help him raise his stock, but his stock went down in the sense of now you can't go get any players for him that can benefit your team in the future. Whereas if you have someone, let's just say like a um, Caden Salter, who had a phenomenal season. During the season, if your team wasn't doing great, you can probably get a haul for him, right? You can probably get some good value for him because you could trade him to a team that's looking strong, but yet they might be a little weak at that quarterback position. So you're like, look, I need help all around. Let me get these positions I need. I have a quarterback for you that he might not be the NFL caliber that you're looking for, but he's gonna get you that victory in the college side of the C2C or your Devy League or whatever it may be. So I think that's something definitely to be important on when it comes to Devy League specifically in your um, topic here. When it comes to drafting and startups, same thing with the freshmen. Even in your sophomores, I think if you're in love with the guy, don't draft them too early. Look at production because that does make a difference. Look at that volume they're receiving, right? Don't go into a draft, especially in your Devy leagues, where you're like, this is a great guy. I'm going to go after him. Sure. But is he a guy that you're just like hoping for the potential? Like Malachi Nelson, I'm going to say again, are you hoping for that? And did you get Malachi Nelson over Dylan Gravy, over a Carson Beck, over, let's say, Will. Not Will Cam Ward, those type of guys that had some production. It's like, okay, they're actually getting some playing time. Where Malachi sat behind Caleb Williams next year, all year, right? And it's like, all right, even though he sat and we knew Caleb Williams was there, am I excited about what he's going to do after the fact, or are we going to go into a bonfire now of what's happening with USC? What's going on there, right? So these Devy assets that you might be excited about, hold off a little bit. Go back to your tape, look at production on guys like a Malachi Corley. There's some you probably on some waivers still go get Malachi Corley in your Devy leagues if you need it, right? If you have waivers and going like that, but Malachi Nelson's probably on a team because someone told him. They're like, I can't drop him. He has that value. I can't drop it for Malachi Corley. Yeah, we talked about earlier. This is a guy that has a potential day 2 second round pick, and you're saying you're gonna hold off on the guy that just transferred out of USC because you put so much value on him, and you probably took him in the top 2 rounds of your daily leagues because you're like, oh, this is a quarterback that's at USC. He's a top 5 prospect in the class. All this for the quarterback position, and don't fall in love with those positions just based on you got it. In Devy League specifically, where you can probably drop players, you're not necessarily doing anything to get them points. Go ahead and drop them. Guess what? There's always quarterbacks. There's always running backs. There's always wide receivers. If they fail you on that production, don't necessarily wait for it. Go and get someone that produces, because that can possibly evolve into a future trade for you because they're showing production. And guess what? You can still go back and get that guy that you already had on your team.
Yeah. I think there's so many ways to play in a C2C, and one method that I've seen a lot that finds trouble for managers is not drafting enough quarterbacks. I always advocate drafting or having at least 10 quarterbacks on your roster. I always advocate that because you don't know about injuries, you don't know about bye weeks, you don't know if that quarterback just broke up with his girlfriend, he's struggling, and he's not going to play that week with mental issues or whatever the case is. The college game is so fickle that you need to have depth at that position, especially in a 2-quarterback league. In a 3-quarterback league, I always recommend you having at least 15 quarterbacks on your roster, because usually those are 50-man rosters. So a lot of times I'll see managers, they only have 5 or 6 quarterbacks to last them the entire season, and then they're in a pinch where they have a couple of guys on bye, a couple of guys hurt, and then they have a Devy guy who's a freshman who's not starting. They have to go through the waiver wire, and if they're in a limited waiver league, they have to burn one of their waivers to get a quarterback just to get through the week. So I always advocate guys, in a standard 2-quarterback league, 45-man roster, to always have at least 10 quarterbacks. In a 3-quarterback league, 50-man roster, to have at least 15, because you are going to have guys that are going to struggle, like Frank Harris struggled. We didn't really expect that. Curtis Rourke struggled. We didn't really expect that. Jay Delora got benched for Noah Fafita. Chevron Cordero, he didn't play that well for San Jose State. I don't even know that because I had him. So there are guys that you think are going to do well that don't do well. But if you have depth at the position, it helps you out. So that's something that I always advocate. And I think that's something that managers need to really take into consideration, because far too often I see them having 5 or 6 quarterbacks and 3 of them are Devy guys that don't play.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that goes into your super flex leagues in the NFL, right? Where you want to have depth at that position, whether it's even backups, just because they gain value, right? Even if it's one game or so, you're like, this is the guy stepping in. Quarterbacks is such a interesting way of transitioning leagues, right? Because when I first started playing fantasy football, it was single QB leagues. This new 2-quarterback super flex leagues are starting to take over. And so you have to value the position a little bit differently, because they're the only player on the field that is touching the ball other than the center every single snap, right? So there is value there, regardless of what team they're playing at. They have some sort of value. You could look at some quarterbacks in that G5 room that have more value than your wide receiver 4 on Georgia or even Washington, simply because they're getting the ball every snap. And these other guys, yeah, they may get the ball and get some big plays, but they're not getting the ball as much, right? So I like that idea. You definitely want to stack up in quarterback, especially in a C2C or Devy league, simply because there's so many out there, right? There's over 100 different quarterbacks you can choose from. So why not go heavy on there and be okay if they have to sit, right? You're doing that for just your stock, right? Just so you have ammo to go out there and get. I would have loved taking Austin Mack. He's a freshman out of Washington, but he's a quarterback that I would have went and I would have taken him over. I believe I took him over like a Montrell Johnson, a running back that I just didn't see much value in, but I saw possible value in Austin Mack coming in as a freshman quarterback down the road once Michael Penix leaves. So the quarterbacks are so valuable for you in every league, really, that has possible to start 2 quarterbacks because of the value of them touching the ball on every single play.
And I think it's also important to value being fluid, like being open to trading a Drake May, being open to trading a Caleb Williams, being open to trading these guys. Like, we're kind of going to go, pull behind the curtains here. I do player profile articles every week, and I'm starting to get, really deep into the quarterbacks, and pretty much all of them, I've I'm advocate. I'm For the most part, I'm advocating to trade up. If you have a Drake May, don't be afraid to trade up to a proven quarterback. So many of these guys are afraid that you know this certain quarterback is going to be the next Joe Burrow, the next Trevor Lawrence. Why not trade to get Trevor Lawrence? There's so much rookie fever that comes around this time of the season and coming into March and April. So I always advocate, if you have a Drake May, trade him for a Trevor Lawrence. You know, the Trevor Lawrence manager might be a little bit tired of him because he hasn't produced the way that they thought that they would, or trade Drake May for a Brock Purdy and something else because Brock Purdy's already there. He's already proven. He's already the starter. You know, Drake May, we don't even know what his landing spot's going to be. It could be with the Patriots. It could be with uh, I don't know. It could be with the Giants. It could be with someone that's less than ideal. And so many managers in a C2C league, they're afraid to trade because they're like, I don't know. He could be the next X. You could
Right.
trade for that player, you know?
Right. Speaking of that, just because you mentioned Drake May, so earlier this season, this was what 3 months ago, so this would have been around like September-ish. But I ended up trading Tank Dell, Drake May, and EJ Smith, Stanford's running back, and I got Louisville's wide receiver Jamari Thrash, running back Alton McCaskill, and Joe Burrow. So but definitely using that value of Drake May's looking like QB2 of this class right before that even showed out. But I went to go get a QB1 that's already proven it in the NFL, right? So I agree 100%. Don't be. It goes back to us saying, don't fall in love with those players. You have assets, right? But yet these college athletes, just like we talked about the high school athletes going into college, we don't know what they're going to be at that next level. We even say Marvin Harrison Jr. He's going to be one of the top prospects, one of the top wide receivers all time. That's what we're saying right now. Is he going to do it? I don't know. He could go out there and guess what? He could go to a horrible situation and it just looks bad for him. It just looks like there's no one there, right? You don't know. So if you can get some value like that, if you have someone right now that's like, I'll trade you Justin Jefferson for Marvin Harrison Jr., I would go do it, right? Because you're looking at a guy that's already been producing at the NFL level, but yet, yeah, you're losing a top guy in Marvin Harrison. But don't necessarily that's not your time to be greedy. If you're like, nah, I need a first plus Justin Jefferson. No, that's a pretty fair value just going out there and saying, okay, I'll get the wide receiver one in the NFL right now. And guess what? You can get the one that might be the future. And I say might because, again, we don't know what's going to happen at that next level. And that's kind of where I felt in this trade. Tank Dell was balling. So it's like, okay, you got Tank Dell now. Burrow's a good quarterback, though. It's a super flex league. But guess what? I'll give you one of my top quarterbacks on my college side in Drake May. And that way you have him. So you still have a quarterback to look forward to in the future. You're losing one now. But guess what? You have another guy coming in. But what if Drake May bust? I won that trade by a landslide then. Right, if Drake May goes, Allen does great. I feel it's an even trade because I got a top tier in Joe Burrow, and now he is a top tier in Drake May. I don't at this point when you're trading your Devy assets for possible NFL ones, you're not necessarily losing it if you get the NFL side because you hopefully you're getting production NFL athletes. And as far as if you're getting the college side, there's a possibility you can lose that trade simply because you don't know what's going to come from that college side. You're basing it off what they've done at that college level. But guess what? NFL's a little bit quicker. NFL, there's more media to you. You're getting Twitter comments on your post, anything like that. So there's a whole different ballgame coming into it. So yeah, if you have a guy saying Caleb Williams is the next Patrick Mahomes, hey, I have Caleb Williams, I'll trade you for Patrick Mahomes. Guess what? I'll throw a second on that. Give me it. But it's being aware about that. And yeah, I mean that goes. Don't fall in love with any asset. I mean, I have teams that are people in all leagues. They're like, no, these players aren't on the block. They're not tradable. Man, money talks. Like if I give you the right price and you reject it, that's on you. But at the same time, if I give you the right price and you're like, okay, that's fair, I'll do it. You gotta know your league mates. You gotta know when to hold them, when to fold them, right? So be tradable, be fluid, be someone that's willing to make the offers or even accept offers. Of course, you can negotiate all the time, but don't fall in love with these college assets simply because they balled out in college. We've seen it time and time again. Players ball out in college and then they don't ball out in the NFL. If they do, maybe it's for a season and then that's it, right? So just be aware. Go get your guys if you can. If you can get those top assets, I would trade the college players all day for them.
And then I think it's important just to kind of note for any first-time C2C players as they get ready for their supplemental draft, this summer, don't necessarily go for the quarterbacks or go for the running backs. Don't go for a Dylan Raiola because you think you should, because you've seen so many highlights here. He's gonna start one day, or day one. Don't fall in love with DJ Lagway, Julian saying the quarterback position is so volatile, and we've seen that this year. Dante Moore, he's already transferred out. He's going to Oregon. He's gonna have to sit a year. Malachi Nelson, he's transferred out. He's looking at pretty much G5 schools. So the quarterback position itself is very volatile. So is the running back position. There was a startup, and I took Rocket Sanders in the first round. I did that. It was the first startup of the year. I think it was sometime in June. And all we got were glowing reports about Rocket Sanders, how he's gone up to 240 pounds, but he's just as fast, hasn't gained any body fat. There were pictures of him, without his shirt on. He was ripped with abs. So, I took Rocket Sanders in the first, I fell for it, so I think quarterbacks and running backs are so volatile that don't be afraid to just go wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. And if you have a roster of 25 wide receivers, but half of them are studs and they're Devy guys, you can trade that from a strength bucket that you have at the wide receiver spot to trade it to a bucket of weakness, as in the quarterback or the running back, and then go from there. I think too many people are so concerned about having a balanced roster that they end up missing out on studs. It's like, oh, I already have too many wide receivers. I need to get a running back. Oh, I already took 5 receivers in the sub draft, and I have 20 returning. That's too much. I can't start all of them. I had to draft a quarterback, and you draft a 4-star quarterback who's the 3rd string kid who's going to get overdrafted or over recruited next year. The importance of a balanced roster or going after other positions because you've already targeted a position, I think that's so overrated, and people need to realize that.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and you look at depth, for running backs last year. I know Cedric Baxter, Ruben Owens, Justin Haynes were flying off the board, right? I got Mark Fletcher Jr., Miami running back like round 15, 16. These other guys were going top 10. That was a freshman running back that I was really excited about. Same thing with the quarterbacks, as you mentioned, Raiola, Say, and Lagway. I mean, I like Michael Van Buren, and that's me looking at his tape out there. I was like, oh, he committed to Oregon. He's since decommitted, and now is Mississippi State a commit. But, I mean, that's a quarterback where I might be targeting now because I know his value isn't as those top tier guys, so I'm not necessarily going for him because I know I can possibly get him in that 4th or 5th in your freshman draft or whatever you may be, rather than that 1st or 2nd with those other guys maybe going just because they're top rated freshman quarterbacks. Yeah, you always will get talent, man. I think, don't get me wrong, if you're weak at a position and a guy is there that has a lot of talent, for sure, take him. But like you mentioned, don't miss on it goes to go back to your tiers. If you have a stud wide receiver on the board, but you're like, man, I'm really hurting for a running back or a quarterback, time and time again, I was like, I'll push them back because I need this guy bet more. I need to go after and get Jacob Cowing. I think he's a great wide receiver. I need to go and get him. And guess what? I'll push. Let's say, I'm just trying to think of a different running back. Rasheen Ali's a bad, just another running back where it's like I was hurrying at the running back position, but I'd rather have Cowing because I like his potential as an athlete, so I agree with that 100%.
All right, SC, we could probably talk for another hour about this, but let's wrap it up. What are you currently working on, and where can we find you on X or Twitter or whatever it's called?
So right now, man, just the rankings. I'm excited to see what's going on with these bowl games. So working on my 2024 rankings and beyond. With all these transfer portal updates, like I mentioned earlier, you want to stay up to date with it. It's crazy right now with how many athletes are in the transfer portal. So adjusting my rankings before I put out another ranking update, just because I don't know who's going where, if they are declaring or even entering the transfer portal or staying. So working on that. RPO football, you can find my IDP start sit article coming out on Thursdays. Still working on some IDDPs. I've been putting that on a halt just again because trying to figure out what's going on with all these people. And just find me on X at the PPR. So doing everything I can with football, wrestling. Find me trying to get in the IDP Devy community for everyone to bring the Devy and IDP community back to light.
Sounds good, man. You can find me at Andy_fam1. I'm going to be doing 2 articles a week, probably every Thursday. Will be a 2024 NFL draft eligible rookie to get you ready for your rookie drafts. Coming up for 2024 in the first half, we're going to be dropping the quarterbacks. I've done Michael Penix Jr., Bo Nix, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is going to be a real interesting one. And then every Friday doing the Freshman Friday, that one is going to come out. I believe the first one is January 5th is the first one. It's going to be Micah Hudson, followed by Jeremiah Smith, and then some others. So get you ready for your sub drafts. And then if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, comment. It all helps to help us grow, and we'll respond back. If you're currently listening on Spotify or Apple, give us a rate and review. And then until Thursday, we'll be back Thursday. Have a good one.